Hello, everybody. So for today's International PR lecture, we are joined by Dr. Pooja Arora, who is with DME University in New Delhi, India. Dr. Pooja Arora has been working in the field for a really long time. I'm going to let her talk more about that. And she has a PhD in journalism mass communication with a specialization in PR. She's written papers in both national and international journals and has taught PR as a subject to undergraduate students in colleges and universities across India. She was one of the first 12 in the public relations changing liberal landscape book. And in my opinion, was actually one of the most insightful. So I'm delighted that she's joining us here today to talk about international PR and the way that things are, I think, vastly different between what we do in the United States and what's done in India, but also how we're similar. So Pooja, why don't you take a little few minutes to introduce yourself?
Firstly, I'd like to thank you for having me here today. I'm truly grateful to you for thinking about me and creating these, little opportunities for us to meet. As I think that is like the best thing possible given the current times. I'm extremely grateful to the students for if they're going to see this recording and I'm for taking out time. And I hope their loved ones are safe and well. In India, why I'm saying is because in India, recently we had these exams for the DME students, and most of them were unwell and they were down with COVID and they couldn't be part of it. So a huge thanks to everyone for taking out time to listen to this session. Uh, Today, it's April 21st, and it's also the National PR Day in India. Okay, and so while it's evening in India and during the day, there were multiple PR and communication sessions, workshops, seminars that were happening. Everyone were discussing about what went good, how the year went by, the nuances of PR. And I'm glad that I've got this opportunity to share my insights at a global platform. So thank you so much. So Catherine, I would like to start with how I got into public relations. And unlike the students, I was pretty unsure about what I wanted to do way back. Uh, but I knew that I was always keen on interacting with new people, making new friends, writing my heart out on whatever interested me. So be it movies or books or relationships, anything. But I understood the power of media, social media, pictures, inspirational stories, and I think this is something that connects everyone, even today. So, and I used to question myself that what in media could I possibly get into, and this was the time when I was pursuing psychology, undergrad in psychology, and I remember getting intrigued by how individuals and organizations establish a strong and trusting relationship with their stakeholders. So, for example, like what does Seton Hall do to build a relationship with their stakeholders? And one of the stakeholders are the students. Does any and like they organize multiple seminars, then conferences, workshops, and this helps the students to actually gain that trust on the university that whatever steps that they are taking, they are for their future, for their benefit. you know so during my final semester of undergraduation, I started reading about public relations, and I thought it was something that was kind of close to what I liked doing that time. So but back then, when I got into studying the subject, that time recession hit the world, and the jobs were not available, and everyone was discouraging me against it, that you're getting into a career and you will not earn anything. And but I was stubborn as always. I went ahead, finished my master's in journalism and mass communication, and rest is history. I realized that the power of public relations and how it helps organizations when I actually got into the field, through the internships, through the jobs. And I still remember that the first job that I did, the first salary that I took was just like $133 a month, you know. But the good thing was that I had a job during a very, very tough time, which was not the case with many of my friends who were in the non-media kind of a role. And the reason why I brought this particular aspect is because we're back in the difficult times, and it's much worse. But the thing that I want to basically talk about is that, despite the fact that media talks about negative things, that, for example, like India records 2.75 lakh COVID cases every year, or sorry, every day, right? And but nobody actually talks about the positive aspect. For example, an individual helping migrant workers or animals to basically provide them with food in this difficult hour. Nobody is talking about the positive aspect. So, I have this doctor friend, and she came to me and said that, Pooja, I'm setting up a clinic and I want you to help me get more patients and do some PR. So, as a first step, I reached out to the select health journalists that I knew. And, this, guess, do you want to guess what they said about doing a PR for a doctor?
I'm very curious.
Yeah, they said that, we don't write about individual doctors. We only cover organizations, and the COVID numbers are something of our interest. That's about it. We don't like to talk about what the doctors do, how much effort they are putting in, nothing like that. If a doctor wants to do his or her PR, they need to, take a paid route, like an advertisement, even despite the fact that they are setting up good camps, they're helping out people. So it was quite unfortunate, but still, with the power of social media, we helped her create these, inspiring videos, which she published. And now, journalists are reaching out to her for stories. So it's a slow process. PR is, as you know, it's a very slow process. It takes time. So that is what happened. And because I've touched upon the topic of social media, I want to spend a little bit time on that, on social media, and how it's become an enabler as part of the entire communication plans for multiple organizations. You know, and I remember 5 years back, when social media was still trying to find its place in the industry, traditional PR could function exclusively, right? And PR practitioners, now they've realized that, how social media is important. But the thing that everyone's confusing, they're getting confused with the fact that social media will just take the place of PR, but that's not true. One needs to understand that social media is like a tool. It's like another tool of public relations, or an important tool that organizations are using to drive communication in a fast and agile manner. So just like today it's social media, tomorrow it could be something else. Like I was reading this article which said artificial intelligence will take over many communication related jobs in the future. But again, it's going to be a tool. Nobody can take the role, the skills, the function of a PR person. One can use AI as a tool in future, yes. And these days it's social media, because if you're not using social media, then the message is not getting amplified. So I mean, social media is a part of the overall PR function, and we need to understand that it can't be used in silos. It's a part of the overall collaboration efforts that are done as part of a like a compiled communication campaign plan, right? So I'll take one example. So there was this I'm not sure if you know of Vicks. Vicks is an American brand that actually helps provide many medications. So I use their Vapor Up when I have cold and all. So they came up with this digital campaign in 2017, and it was called Touch of Care, which basically spoke about how it was actually around the sensitive topic of transgenders, and how they can also provide care to their younger ones. you know. And in India, people are very emotional, so the campaigns are also designed in such a manner that it can make you emotional. So that campaign was a great success. And obviously, while we understand that social media can make one a hero, it can also make one a zero. For example, like the recent Burger King's tweet on International Women's Day, where they said that women only belong in the kitchen, and that was considered as a sexist phrase. Everybody, the critics said that why, I mean, the brand is so cheap and disrespectful of women, all of that. But that is not what they were trying to say. They wanted to say that the best of chefs are women, but the way the messaging came out, I mean, everybody just blasted them left side and left, right, and center on social media. So it was quite bad. And another example is of another PepsiCo brand only, Lay's chips. So just before the lockdown, they came up with this campaign, and that campaign had a few boys and girls hanging out with each other, eating Lay's chips and enjoying. And the campaign also said, "Have fun, enjoy yourself, have Lay's chips." But then, few days after that ad came in, lockdown was declared in India. And so on social media, what happened? People started calling the campaign very insensitive, because there were people who did not have food to eat, and they were talking about having chips and having a good time. So again, uh, just to reiterate, so while social media can make you a hero, it can also bring you down. So that is one. The other is, bad news travel really fast. So and PR and organizations need to ensure that um, that the PR person is on their speed dial always. Because whatever happens, whether it's a social media crisis or a regular crisis, uh, a PR person can help get back the reputation, the image. They always have the strategies in mind to help the brand. So and one also needs to understand that, since given that social media is completely an unforgiving space, I mean, it could be fast, it is agile, everything, but it can really ruin your image. So that is one. And another interesting aspect is that when I was in the business, so 5 years back, nobody actually recognized social media influencers, bloggers. Nobody cared about them. Everybody was like, okay, yeah, by the way, somebody wants to write something, be there, so they've written. But now, journalists are picking up stories, basis different blogs, different tweets, all of that. And organizations are recognizing that, okay, if a blogger is saying something, it's important. Like a travel blogger, if they're writing about a hotel or a hospitality industry, I mean, it makes sense rather than a regular article. So again, social media is a great innovative tool for PR. And basis whatever I've just said, there are a few takeaways that I'd like to share. One, PR or public relations are the guardians of the brand or the organization, because be it small, medium, large, whatever, every organization today needs PR. They want to stand out, whether these are good times, bad times. And we've seen that in COVID times, how important the role of how much a PR person is important for an organization. Then number two, the role of PR is to be very flexible. And they need to know that, okay, times are changing, we need to adapt or adopt new PR tools. So for now, it's social media. Earlier, it was television. At my time, everything was on television. Everybody just wanted to be on the television. And now it's social media. Tomorrow, it could be something else. So it's an evolving field, but the tools are, the main thing is that the tools are evolving, nothing else. And number three, that the function of PR does not limit to media relations, while most of it does, but it revolves around crisis management, government affairs, employee relationship. So it's PR is basically a communication center of an organization. One can't just say that, okay, for media relations, let's go to PR and forget about their role in the other communication aspect. And number four, PR needs social media right now. So because social media is like the reflection of the number of hours that one is spending on this platform. So it completely depends on the consumption, and I think that is what is important. Yeah, thank you.
I think I want to get back to your point about the evolution or the growing influence of the influencer and the blogger. I think that's so interesting and it's spot on. I remember, you probably remember too, the whole thing with the Arab Spring a couple of years ago when Twitter was really used to report on what was going on in that part of the world because it had been such a situation that had been kept, undercover by the government there. And then Twitter, and then the concept of the citizen journalist have really evolved, which I think then led to the growth and prominence of these influencers. And I know in the US, influencers are like, to your point, they're like journalists. And the major media look to some of these influencers for what the news is. And the crazy part here is, and I don't know if it's the case in India, but we have some influencers here who literally every day report their own version of the news. So and because they'll have like 90 million followers, their population perceives that is the news. And the challenge is these influencers are global. So there's a guy out of, I think it's Sweden, named PewDiePie, who has like over 90 million followers. And I know he's very in with the Gen Z group, as are most of these influencers. And so where you and I may look to, a global news outlet, we'll take like CNN or BBC, for example, to set the news. That generation doesn't even occur to them to go to a traditional news outlet. They're looking at social media and, more importantly, the influencers on social media to dictate what's important and to frame it in a certain way, which is very, very different from how we all grew up. And I do know that here, some of these bloggers, for example, if you pitch them, they want to be paid. They'll write anything you tell them as long as you pay them. And it can be 5,000, 10,000 US dollars for one post, because they know that their influence is so strong that you need them a lot more than they need you. Do you have, do you have that same structure in India with having to pay the influencers to write stories? Is it the same situation there?
Yeah, it's the same situation here, but since it's a new trend here, I mean, some of them are paid, some of them are still upcoming. So then they start with an unpaid thing, but once they develop and they have this big followership, then they come to the paid category. So
That's
yes,
crazy.
I mean, it's a scenario everywhere.
And then the other thing, and this I came across in my research for the book, was the role of the micro influencer. Some micro influencer defined as someone, 100,000 followers or less. But what we're seeing here is a lot of companies would rather pay 10 micro influencers to reach different segments of a market rather than they would say one person like a Kim Kardashian, for example, because she's so expensive. But some of these folks who have, right around 100 to 150,000 influencers, they're very, very powerful in their own ways. I mean, it's funny, I even have a couple of students who have done their own stuff on the side and are actually getting to like a micro influencer category, because they understand how to make everything work. And it's really, really fascinating when you talk about that with them, and the opportunity that as a side gig, as they call it here, that they can get paid by these brands to be represented.
Yeah.
Now it's fascinating. So as far as social media, I would say the platforms that are biggest here are Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok. Those are especially for the Gen Z millennial group. For Gen X, it's Facebook. And then, people above that, if they go on, it's probably Facebook. What is it like in India? Are TikTok and Instagram and Snapchat pervasive there, or are they still emerging?
So TikTok was banned during the lockdown because it was a China thing,
Right.
and so but the Instagram brand is definitely popular. Of like you said, Generation X is basically following Facebook, and that still holds true. And but I think people are slowly moving from Facebook to Instagram.
Yeah.
And I think before lockdown, TikTok was becoming something. It was just competing with Instagram, and there were a lot of people who actually became actors, television actors, film actors after their TikTok videos. So youngsters actually started opting for a TikTok over Instagram, but then after lockdown, things changed completely. Now, obviously, the other brands like Facebook and Instagram, they've created these stories and Insta stories and Facebook Live stories, all of that. But it's not, one can't really match it up with TikTok.
Pooja,
So
hold on for 1 second. Hold on.
yeah,
There's someone at my door. Hold on. Okay, so
yeah,
we were just we were just talking about TikTok and Facebook and Instagram. So is TikTok still unavailable in India? You can't access
yeah,
it right now?
yeah.
Wow. So it's so interesting here. So a
But
lot of the way our music, go ahead.
yeah, there were different apps that were actually banned. So I was using this another app called Cam Scanner in my office, and it was really helpful because I could just scan anything immediately and send it across. But
Yeah.
then that was again banned with TikTok because of that.
Wow. I mean, that's crazy. So so TikTok really, I mean, I guess again, for the millennials and for Gen Z, it is the dominant platform. And most musical artists now, unless you're Taylor Swift, most musical artists will, as they say, they'll release a mini version of their song on TikTok, and then it trends, and then it winds up being in the top 20, and my kids will be in the car listening to popular music and be like, oh, that was a TikTok song, oh, that was a TikTok song. So TikTok here, to your point, just like it was doing in India, it has made people go from sitting in their kitchen dreaming of being stars to like literally being stars overnight. There's a woman here named Olivia Rodrigo, and she's like 18 years old, and she put one of her songs on TikTok and it blew up, in a good way, as they say. Um, and she's one of those people that became famous during COVID, just completely unexpectedly. She's 18 years old. So it is very, very interesting to me how it just kind of came on the scene, and the dominant force that it's become. Um,
Power
you
of
know,
social media that we are seeing actually.
Yeah, yeah. And we were talking on one of the other conversations with one of the other experts a few weeks ago. I asked the question of, what do you think is the best way to break a story right now? Um, and so I'm curious, I'll tell you what he said after you share your answer, but I'm curious as to what you think for at least for India, like what's the best way to break a story there?
So I would again say the collaborative efforts. We,
Okay.
we can't really say that, a video will work or just a social media effort will work. It has to be collaborated, like a 360-degree approach. So social media, then it has to be PR efforts with your regular press release tools, something that works together. So marketing efforts. So that is how one can actually break a story. Yeah, in India. And
So
it's
it's
actually
interesting.
worked.
It works well. Do you guys still write press releases to break a story, or press release? Yeah.
Yeah.
So he said it was Anthony Harrison, who's at Anaplan, who said this. He said he thought the best way to break a story was still to go with a media exclusive, which he then follows up with other things like social media, put out a press release, stuff like that. But to him, the power of the media exclusive in a high value publication. So for here, it would be, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Chicago Tribune. The value, in his opinion, the value of that is still so strong, and not just for when it first drops, but the pass along value, so you being able to take the story and send it to your friends or to your customers or to your executives and saying, look where we got coverage today. He still thought the value of that, despite all the changing dynamics of public relations, has become really, really important. And I thought that was interesting, because my whole philosophy in PR is and when I work with clients now and when I did it years ago, was I never liked to just put a press release out. I always say I like to have it for it to have a home. So I would always try to get someone to cover it. And I would of course always strive for, the top level media. But if that wasn't the case, I would take it down to the industry level or the trade level, just so it appeared somewhere.
Yeah.
Because the challenge with the release is you put it out and it just becomes like vaporware, especially these days.
Yeah.
So I was just curious as to how that was, done in India.
Yeah, so I mean, earlier, we also used to do that. We used to give it to one of the leading news wires like a PTI, ANI, Reuters to publicize, but it's not working anymore. I mean, we are doing the releases and it's not working. I mean, there has to be a social media push, there has to be a marketing push. The news, the narrative that we draw or craft, it has to be different. And there's so much competition. Everybody wants to talk about a human interest story given these times, and it's difficult.
It
So it's that is like so that is why I said a collaborative approach is working right now in India, and it's not just one story or one exclusive that is creating that big bang that used to happen before COVID, because that was our approach earlier. We used to give it to a news wire and be happy about it, that our job is done. Now other publications will pick it up from that portal.
right, right.
But yeah, so
So something I was curious about was India is such a big country, filled with so many different cultures within that of being from India, and there's so many different wonderful energies and stuff over there. Um, when you release a campaign, do you have to tweak it to address the sensitivities, challenges, desires, wants, whatever you want to call it, of some of these subsections of the culture? Or can you just put out a blanket campaign there? Because here, I mean, in the US, we have some distinct places. Like if you're from Texas, which is in the southern United States, like you're from Texas, and people from Texas, like it's pretty clear. Like we definitely have our division between folks that live in the Northeast, which is where I live, and folks that live in the South. And then people in the Midwest are a little different, but we can use one general campaign when we put stuff out. How is it done in India?
So, obviously, responding to cultural diversity is a natural expression to any market. But you know, it depends from every brand. Every brand is different. Whatever messaging that they're giving, is it relevant to that particular regional market or not? Will that one? Obviously, you can't develop 10 messages for 10 markets. There has to be some unique aspect, and that is what is kept in mind in India as well. But then it is tweaked to the specific diversity needs, language, tonality, understanding, because in India there are multiple languages, different cultures, so you can't really talk in one language. Like our national language is Hindi, right? So you can't really have one campaign in Hindi, because there are other states like a Maharashtra will have Marathi, so you will have to tweak that campaign as per the language. uh, the overall messaging might remain the same, but the tonality, the way it's done, the way words are tweaked, that will only change. But yeah, that can be actually adapted to different markets. And but there are different brands that actually come up with different techniques to go into different brands. So for example, they'll say that, okay, we'll just opt for a regional release, to get into a market, and then they'll not do a big bang kind of a campaign. But there are brands who will say that, no, we to enter a regional brand or a regional market, we will also do a PR, but we will also reach out to the national and online media. So I mean, it depends on brand to brand actually.
Do you think that that goes to influencers and bloggers as well? Are they more regionally focused or are they nationally focused in the country?
Actually, it depends on the brand completely. It
Okay.
doesn't really matter to the bloggers because
Yeah,
for
they'll
them,
just do anything.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah, it doesn't really matter. They just want to entertain everyone. So it doesn't really matter in regional aspect. It's more to do with national. Yeah.
And I, as you were sitting there talking, I was thinking about, what other country in the world has such a population and diversity of cultures. Maybe China, um,
Yeah.
maybe
Even
Brazil.
Europe, all, yeah, but not exactly in terms of population, but in terms of countries. I mean, I
Yes.
think their messaging is also tweaked as per the different countries that are there.
Yes, but they're individual countries. You guys are
Yeah.
one giant country. Maybe I'm thinking maybe Brazil because of the diversity in between the North and the South. But I think, having been fortunate to have traveled all over the world, except to India, of course. It's when COVID is lifted, I will come and see you. Um,
Definitely.
yeah, I can't think of a standalone country that has the diversity of the cultures and the religion and the languages of India. And so I think from again maybe China, but I think from that standpoint, it is fascinating from a public relations standpoint. Because if you're in France, you can do a general campaign for the French, and same with Japan, and same with Germany, and same from Australia, and same for Chile. But in Canada. But I do think India is unique in that sense. And that is just fascinating when you look at it or think about it from a standalone perspective. And so I think for, PR firms or large global multinationals that I would imagine that a lot of companies and a lot of agencies give thought to rollouts in India. And some of them probably just treat it, oh, it's just like any other country, and probably fail miserably because they don't take into consideration the cultural sensitivities and the cultural diversities that you have there. And it's just really fascinating to me in that sense.
Absolutely. And even the media works very differently in different states. So there could be one state which where the media only looks at paid angles, So if you want a story, you need to pay them. Otherwise, they'll not publish it. Otherwise there are other states wherein, they completely work on organic or pay or the PR led stories. So I mean the way different regions work and states work, one has to actually research and find out, through the various affiliates that are there.
Do you have, as far as the media, do you have papers that are national across the country, or are they all region specific? How does it work there?
So both. So there are national papers and there are regional papers.
Okay.
So if there are national papers, they will have branches in different states, different editions. That is what I meant. And there are specific regional papers which will only go in one particular state and no other state. So it's a lot of publications that still come out, even if even though the world is saying that the print will go down and it's shrinking, all of that. Although it's shrinking, yes, but in India, vernaculars still are very close to everyone's heart.
It's just so fascinating. I mean, here, and it's really, I guess, the same case here in terms of the parallel of the media structure, because we do have obviously national publications like the New York Times, like the Wall Street Journal, like USA Today, but then we also have regional ones for, the LA Times, the Dallas Morning News, the Chicago Trib, Philadelphia Inquirer, things like that. So there's parity or similarity, I should say, in that sense. It's just so interesting. So in your experience of seeing US companies come to the US, do you have any great stories about some that have failed because of the way they did their PR, because of the way they messed up? Like, do any come to mind?
uh, I think I gave one example of Burger King,
Yes.
the recent example. That was a bad one, but there are good ones I can think of. I can think of Amazon, I can think of Netflix. They've actually created an impact on people's mind. People they don't consider them as international or American brands. Same goes for Wix brand, the one that I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
So I mean, and if I think there are many people who will just they take Wix as an Indian brand only. If they'll not Google it, they'll not find it that uh, Wix is actually an American company.
Yeah.
And again, Lay's that I also spoke about.
Yeah.
It's a PepsiCo brand. Then I think then there is Dell, and then there is Google. I think people in India, because of the increasing broadband connection, there are around, I think, over 70 crore broadband connections in India, and I think people understand that Google is like, their Indian brand. They don't know that it's an American brand. So I mean, the
That's
way they have
amazing. That's
done that,
amazing.
yeah, that's actually amazing, because people don't now, they can't differentiate between an American company or an Indian company. The way they have created their communication campaigns is remarkable.
It's so interesting because I know here, the company I always bring up is Red Bull. Everybody assumes, I don't know if you have Red Bull there, but Red Bull, they make a caffeinated drink, and it's, like a high energy drink. So they are very big in sports, in what do they call them? Like the extreme sports.
Yeah, extreme.
And everyone always thinks they're a US company. They're not. They're actually based in Austria. And the only reason I know this, because when I was in Austria, we were walking by this building and our guide said, "Oh, do you know Red Bull?" We're like, "Yeah." He's like, "That's the headquarters." We were shocked. It was one of those brands that I just assumed was American. So I think it's fascinating that some of these, you can call them iconic American brands, have the reputation as being, just from India. I mean, that's fascinating. Like Vicks has been around for forever in the United States.
Yeah.
And the fact that they've been able to translate into, a company that people think is local, that's incredible. Amazon, Google, that really is fascinating. Nike's another one. I think Nike is one,
Yeah.
due to what they do and how they do it,
Right.
that their ability to translate down to the local market is unprecedented. In this class earlier in the semester, we looked at the difference in the ads, or the adverts as they call it in the UK, between what Nike does here and what Nike does in the UK. And it was fascinating, and it was primarily looking at their sponsorship of soccer, or, as it's called globally, football, as we call it here, soccer. It was fascinating, and just the different themes that were projected and the different ways that the Nike identity was interpreted was fascinating. It just, and then we looked at some commercials that had run actually in Asia, across Asia, and themes that would not be done here. Some of them were talking about sexuality and all of that, and it was very overt, whereas here we would not be nearly as overt with talking about, feminine reproduction and that whole thing. It was verging on shocking to me, but to some of the students who were from China and Singapore, they're like, no, this is just how it is. Like, this is what we do. So I think it's just so interesting because I think that we in the United States tend to think, oh, we're so open, we're so willing to talk about everything. We're not. And you see that culturally when you look at, PR campaigns, advertising campaigns from around the world. It's so interesting. And I would think for you guys, with the diversity of cultures and religions, it must be fascinating to see, pardon me, how something will come out in one region of India versus another region of India, depending upon the religious and the cultural influences.
Right. Absolutely. That is actually what happens. Yeah.
Yeah. So from your perspective of worked in the field and studied the field, what to you is necessary for success in PR, in public relations right now? We've heard a diverse. This is a question that always comes up when we have guest lecturers, and it's something, it's something that, a few weeks ago, someone said, it was so poignant, I thought, the ability to have an unstructured conversation. And that is, I agree. It was so poignant the way that he said it. And my takeaway was like a wow initially. And then I thought about it, and I always joke that like I can talk to anyone, because I kind of can. And that is true. Like the ability to be unstructured and to have the capability to have a dynamic conversation. I think that's really important. And obviously you have to be comfortable working with different people. But what else from your perspective do you think is super important for PR people these days?
Right. So I think when our organization is hiring, so they always ask us that, what are the qualities that you're looking for in a PR person. And given the current times, we always tell them that, firstly, the person needs to understand PR. They need to understand how social media works. But other than that, they also need to be good communication experts. And I mean, obviously, one cannot be an expert just at the drop of a hat. Obviously, they can learn the skill, but then they should be ready to learn, because these days I've noticed, the youngsters, they think that they are just know it all, and they don't want to learn at all. But every organization, they ask for a different kind of narrative. They have a different story. So that skill of empathizing with them, understanding what the organization needs, what is the kind of story that they can weave that can actually be different from their competitors. Researching is another skill. So I mean, while the website of the particular organization is there and one can research about what they do, but it's also important to understand and know what other people are doing. Just like the way you do, you, Catherine, that you're always fascinated by what the PR campaigns are there across the country, because you're not limiting your learning. You are also learning every day. I am also learning every
That's
day, and
right.
I think that research, that learning shouldn't really stop, because PR is an ever evolving field, and one needs to be privy of that fact. And like PR, the other thing is that one needs to remember that PR is earned media, and it's not like advertising. So that's whatever you write, whatever story that you weave needs to be very, very strong. And I think the other skills, I think, are obviously being agile, being flexible. If a journalist is calling you, you shouldn't restrict yourself to being the fact that I have a 8-hour job and I will not talk to anyone after that. That kind of attitude shouldn't be there, because at the end of the day, we are helping different stakeholders. We are helping our organization communicate their message, and so one needs to be flexible. And obviously time management, PR people, they work in the last minute deadlines, they have all of that, and they need to work it out. So that is one. The new thing, the recent thing around social media that we've identified is social listening. you know uh, uh, Organizations trying to, they should actually try to understand that, okay, if they have these million followers or these million people buying their product, what is it that they are actually saying about the product after buying it? What is the feedback? So this happens on social media. So taking the feedback positively, replying, responding to them, these are also some of the new aid skills, if I could put it, for a PR person. Yeah.
I think your concept of social listening is so true. We were talking in a class of mine earlier this week, in my PR2 class, about the challenges of social media, but also the advantages of social media, because it does, and we were talking about it with regard to community relations, right? And how does an organization define a community? And typically, 10, 20 years ago, your community was, where the company is headquarters, who are your customers, and who are your suppliers, and, your employees and all that. But now the community is global for an organization. And the fact that social media has enabled companies to connect with their customers on a personal level, and to get immediate feedback in many ways on the quality of the product, and a customer satisfaction with the product. And it can be great, and it can also be hurtful if the organization doesn't have dedicated resources to, for example, monitoring chats or responding to reviews on, sites like Yelp or other review sites. But it really has changed the way that organizations communicate with all of their target publics and develop relationships with those target publics. and it is right, it is social listening. And it can, like I said, it can be helpful or it can be a hindrance depending upon how seriously the companies take it. Something I'm always very impressed by is when a company, be it big or small, responds to everybody. They don't just respond to the person that says, "Oh, you're great." When they take the time to respond to the person that says, "You know what, I'm not satisfied, and these are the reasons that I'm not satisfied." And when the company, when they go back and forth several times, like that to me shows a commitment to the customer, and that to me shows a commitment to being the best company or the best brand that you can be. And I know, I'm sure you've seen this in your research too, that here the importance of the brand being genuine and the importance of the brand standing up for what it believes in and communicating what it believes in is becoming increasingly important to the consumer.
Yeah.
Um, so it's a fascinating time. And to your point, like social media has influenced the way that we as PR people promote products, but it's also greatly impacted the way that companies interface with the journalist, interface with the customer, and so forth and so on. So it's fascinating. So I'm basically 1,000% agree with you on that one. It's really,
Yeah.
really good stuff.
It's important for organizations to be mindful of the fact that how they want to use the social media platform. Do they want to go all aggressive, or they want to, opt for a, partial kind of approach, that they want to just do a weekly kind of a post, or a, monthly kind of a post. So they have to understand the kind of customers or the kind of target audience that they're dealing with. So yes, social media can definitely help, but it can definitely hamper their reputation as
Oh
well.
yeah. I mean, and the worst thing a company can do is start posting and then stop posting, or start
Yeah,
responding and then stop responding, because the reaction is like, well, what happened? Um, and most of these companies aren't like, a Kim Kardashian or a Demi Lovato, who's a singer here, saying, "I'm going to take a social media break." Like they just stop. And
yeah,
when they do that, that's where it's like, what happened? And so as I said, it's a blessing and it's a curse depending upon, how the organization takes it. Are you finding in India that reporters are just increasingly burdened with everything? Because I know here we're just finding that they barely have time to think, let alone talk. Is it the case? Same case over there?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're short-staffed. They don't have people, and I think PR people are taking advantage of this fact, and they are trying to support them with ideas, and they try to help them with releases. They are basically plugging all the information, and that's why the role of PR person becomes all the more important in India, because the kind of story, the kind of narrative that they will plug in, or they will try to give to the journalist, it'll actually help in influencing the overall target audience of that particular publication. So I think that is also happening in India.
Totally agree with you. It's absolutely the same case here. I'm trying to think what else I wanted to talk to you about. I just, as I said, I did not, before we talked today, I did not give that much thought, truly naive, on the cultural diversity of India and the challenges that poses for the PR professional. That was something that kind of occurred to me, I don't know, yesterday at some point. I was like, wow, we really wanted to probe you on that one, because it's just so interesting. Like I said, I think India is so unique in that sense. I mean, you have the world's largest population, but there's just so many. I think for an American company approaching India, there's so many ways to mess up, because they're just, I don't think, unless you are hands on the ground, feet on the ground, people managing, looking at the nuances of the communications rollout, you're going to screw it up. The challenge is, and I'm sure you've seen this, and the challenge here is, once a company screws up with a public campaign, it really takes a while to reverse it, and to build, to build back in a way that's meaningful and poignant, and that's gonna, if in any way, make up for the errors that were done before. I find that absolutely fascinating. Oh, I have something else I'm curious about. So, are there people from the US, be it celebrities, be it politicians, be it athletes that are very impactful. I mean, we have, I know that basketball here, like a lot of the basketball players, like LeBron James, for example, who's a global name, uh, he has a lot of influence in the United States. Um, are there American, like I said, actors, athletes, whatever, that have a lot of influence in India? We'll call them, I'm not going to call them influencers because that's a little bit different, but that are looked up to from what you've seen?
Yeah, so I think it's not just American, even Indian actors, Indian sportsmen, American actors, all of them are, considered in that category where media would cover wherever they are. So there was this event that we were having, and there was this international sportsman who had come to train school kids, and the media, the sports media was so much interested, and they just came in and covered him. So it happens. I mean, it's not just for American sportsmen or actors. It happens because Bollywood is very popular. The cricket culture is very popular in India. So all the sports stars, people really follow them, and sports and films are two great things that people love to follow in India. And I
Well, I
think,
mean, Bollywood has its own place in American, I mean, it's very, very popular here. And there have been films, of course, well, there have been some amazing films that have come out of India in the past decade that have really helped to spread the understanding and awareness of what the whole Bollywood culture and what that is. And there are some actors of Bollywood fame that have transferred over into the U.S. screen, and that's fascinating to me. So I think that there's so much that we as a culture can learn from India and from the people that you have there. And I think that our error as country sometimes is we tend to think that it's either our way or the highway, but that doesn't work, as we know, especially in a country like India that has such a diverse cultural population. It's so incredibly important to go, that concept of globalization, where you take the global concept and bring it down to the local level, is so important in your country. It's just so important.
thank you so much. Yeah.
No, it's true. So what have I missed? What else do you want to share with these students? Um,
Uh, I think we've covered mostly everything, but I think if they'd like to know, what is it that one can enjoy in a PR field or an industry, it could be that there are no boring days for a PR person.
That's so
Each day,
true.
yeah, each day is different. One day you'll be managing crisis, the other day, you'll be tracking news, crafting some new story around a new campaign, and then obviously you're solving communication related problems for an organization. So your seat is always next to the leadership, which is like a big deal. And I think that is quite inspiring for the youngsters, that you're not going into any regular kind of a career or a field. It's something which is kind of big, so they can truly get inspired with it.
Well, and I think, what you just said kind of underscores something that I've said and that a lot of the other speakers have said, is that the strategic role of PR is only growing. But the
Yeah.
way that it's maximized and the way that it's valued is really when you do have a seat at the table and where you do report in to either the CEO or at least the CMO. But to me, that direct reporting line is incredibly important. I was very fortunate in my last full-time job, professional job, I should say, that I reported into the CEO. And so, and we were I guess like a $6 billion company. And he also understood what public relations was all about. So I didn't realize it, but I really was quite spoiled at the time, because he not only did he understand what my role was, he valued it. And so when I said, I have so and so on the phone from the Wall Street Journal, now I need you to talk to him, he would stop the meeting and come.
Yeah.
And didn't really need that much prep. Like, what are we talking about? I would tell him and he would just go. And he was he very much wanted to, he would call them friendlies. He would say, KL, as he used to call me, KL, like, who are our friendlies? Like, who can we talk to about this issue, either on background or on deep background? Because he knew that if we helped a reporter out on one story that wasn't necessarily about us, but was about somebody else that they were looking at, that down the road, they would help us with the story. And I say to my students, like, there are jobs, and I'm sure you feel the same way, when you look back on your career, in PR, we tend to move a fair amount and we tend to have sort of an interesting portfolio of jobs. But there's always one, I think there's one for everybody that's transformative. And I know for me, that was definitely that last job. Unknowingly, I learned more in 5.5 years in this corporate role that I learned in, the 15 years prior. And I can't say that's the case for everyone with all jobs. Do you feel that way as well?
Yeah, actually, when I started my career, I started in a corporate role, and there were so many things that I did not know, which the PR agency guys knew. So I thought, there is something that is missing in my understanding, my knowledge, my awareness. So the next job that I took was in an agency. Then I spent a couple of years there, tried to understand, the things that are not really taught in a college. But when you face multiple clients, different sectors, how things work, client relationship building, all of that. So I think that kind of learning happened in an agency for me, but in a corporate, because now I'm back in a corporate role, and obviously doing guest lecturing as well. I think now I'm in that position to actually share my experiences with everyone and learnings with everyone. But that role that I did in my previous organization was something that I think everyone should get into, especially in India.
One of the other speakers says he loves agencies because you're getting paid to learn.
Yeah.
And that was the same person that talked about unstructured conversations. But I agree with that. You never think of an agency that way, but you're working on multiple client accounts, usually of different, of different varieties, working with different personalities, working with different media. And just because of the huge array of people and personalities and clients, you learn
Yeah.
so much and you don't realize you're learning it because you're just trying to get through it all.
Yeah.
But
I think all young people should definitely start with an agency if possible as their first job. I mean, that's a mistake that I did, but that was a learning for me. And I think one should definitely start with an agency, because that's where they can grow and understand the field in a much better way.
You took the words right out of my mouth. That's exactly what I was going to say. I completely agree with you. Um, because the training that you get is unlike anything you're going to get corporate. Um, and you learn how to think, you learn how to ask the right questions, you learn how to pitch in a way that you're never going to learn when you're in-house. So yeah, I think that, the agency is the great stepping stone into corporate, and some people never go corporate. I mean, I have, some friends who are quite senior at places like Edelman and Hill and Knowlton, and Weber Shandwick, who have never done corporate. They've always been agency people. And then I have a few friends that have always been corporate. But I think the sweet spot is when you can have that blend of the agency and the corporate, because not only do you appreciate the role of each, but you understand the relationship between the two.
Yeah.
And I think that that's incredibly important.
And I
Well,
think in an agency, they chart out the growth chart very nicely. You can actually see
yes.
one growing from a trainee to actually a vice president. I've seen that happening. So I think they take care of their employees in a much better way. In corporates, the growth is slow, but then definitely the kind of work and the role that there is, it's a varied kind of role. You're not just doing one media relations aspect. You're wearing multiple hats actually.
Yeah, it's very, very true. It's very, very true. So, Dr. Pooja Arora, I have nothing else to say, but thank you for taking the time to talk to us. And you're 10 and a half hours ahead of us, so it's not that horrible of a time difference here, which is good. But thank you. I mean, I just loved talking about, the differences between what we do here and what you do there, and so many similarities. And your insights in the book were, like I said, I thought tremendous. And I know I learned a lot from reading them, and I'm sure our students have as well. So is it okay if the students contact you through LinkedIn? Are they allowed to do
Yeah,
that?
yeah. LinkedIn, yes, and even they can email me also. You have my
Okay.
email address. Yeah.
I do. So I will share that with them. Well,
All
thank
right.
you.
Thank you. It was a
Um,
pleasure being here. I think it was a great session. I had fun. I think we should do this more often.
I'm going to take you up on that because
Yeah.
I know I'm not kidding. We are quickly coming to the end of our academic year here. We end in about 3 weeks, but we start up again in September, so you can bet your bottom dollar I'm going to ask you to come in and guest lecture.
Sure.
Yeah, and it's interesting. In the fall, I'm going to be teaching an advertising course. So
Oh,
I would love to pick your brain and to have you talk to students about ad campaigns in India. We could do a side-by-side comparison. I think that would be a lot of fun. So we can
sure.
talk about that at some other point. So, all right, thank you so much. I will stop.
All right. Thank you. Lovely interacting with you once
Yes,
again.
my pleasure. Thank you so much.
And could you share this recording